All right, well, welcome everyone. Really a great topic today um, on retaining key employees. And I'm sure this is of great interest to all the attendees here, and just a really timely and important, timely and timeless topic, I would say. And what I like about this is kind of the subtitle is one size does not fit all. So we have a great team that's going to cover this today. So first is Jeremy Suarez, who's a seasoned financial advisor and managing partner at Tomorrow. And he's been leveraging 2 decades of experience in wealth management. And then James Carlisle, an attorney and partner at Dinsmore and Schul, and chair of the National Growth and Exit Planning Group. And both gentlemen are certified in the exit planning space. So very, very lucky to have these gentlemen. Thank you so much for doing this. It's going to be a great topic. And with that, over to you.
Appreciate it, Dave. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so thanks for everyone for joining. Really like the topic, and when we were approached by John, my tab facilitator, to speak on it, we thought it was a great opportunity just to share some insights and also gain some insights, right? So, as Dave mentioned, really what we're looking to do is lead a practical discussion on how we introduce the topic of key employee retention, right? So, a little bit by way of background regarding our firm. We're essentially an RIA. Dave dated me a little bit, so I have 19 years in the business, not yet 20, so not 2 full decades. But essentially, where we got started in the business was in the comprehensive wealth management and estate planning space, right? My partner, Michael Canarak, he's an estate planning attorney. So most of the folks that came to us were combined, highly compensated to moderately compensated W-2s. And where we practice here in Red Bank, New Jersey, about 40 to 45% of our clientele are small business owners, right? So, when we start the process as it relates to working with business owners, essentially what we're looking to do is create a cadence, right? A funnel. So, what we do is we send the business owner an assessment which captures about 16 what we believe to be relevant topics that within a business owner's tenure or running their business could be relevant to support the idea of, again, growth and exit planning. And really my goal for an initial consult or an initial engagement is to really funnel those 16 categories into our top four. And as a side note, typically those top four, they all trend the same, right? So, we do a lot of work initially in the family succession and estate planning space, tax minimization, helping business owners understand value, and then, of course, the topic today, which is key employee incentive and retention planning, right? So, because most of our clients have done various levels of work with us, when we start bringing up the topic and expanding on the topic of key employee retention, many of our clients want to get to the how-to. As a wealth manager, immediately it's a discussion around, what's the product, what's the strategy, what's the contract that we could put in place to support the idea of retaining, attracting, essentially golden handcuffing these key employees so they can extend their tenure with the said organization. And a lot of times what Jim and I will do is we'll take a step back and start focusing on some more of the qualitative items, right? Getting an understanding of the personas that we're looking to solve for. And in our a lot of times with these key business or key employees, they are not business owners. So understanding their motivating factors, I think, is essential before we get to the how. The top three personas that we typically see are individuals that are motivated by money and compensation, individuals that are motivated by freedom and control, and then also individuals that are motivated by recognition and ownership, right? So, Jim, I know you have some comments on additional motivating factors, but maybe you give us a little background on your tenure with Dinsmore.
Yes, so I'm a little older than Jeremy. I've been doing this for 34 years now. And I'm a growth and exit planning lawyer that is kind of a different breed, because when I work with my clients, I'm not an order taker. I have long-term relationships with my clients. And so when they have ideas that they want to consider implementing, we talk about whether they're viable, whether they're the best outcome. I have pre-existing knowledge of their facts and circumstances, so I can weigh in as to whether or not that idea and plan might be best. And then we move forward to build a solution together. So it's a little different practice, growth and exit planning and merger and acquisition transactional work. And so I chair a group at Dinsmore that is around that. Dinsmore is a 850 lawyer firm with 37 offices. So we've got a deep bench that have experts that do all the little subspecialties of what they need. And that's why I like being there, because if my clients have needs, I can always find somebody in our network to be able to dig in. As far as national firms go, we're a Midwest-based firm. So I like the mentality. It's more practical than some of the coastal firms I've found from experience. So I think we bring that to our clients. So over the years, I've worked on hundreds of employee compensation plans and employee incentive plans and the related legal documentation with employment agreements. And the one thing that it's clear to me as I do growth and exit planning projects is that key employee retention is so important. And a lot of business owner clients don't get that. Like when I'm doing my initial interviews with them, they'll speak of how important they are to the business. They'll talk about how they do this and that, and they're so essential. And if they take a vacation, how the business will sputter in their absence. And they're proud of it because they've had a career of delivering impact and they think that's important. They don't realize that that devalues the company. At an exit, the founder oftentimes is no longer involved with the company. They might be involved for a transition period. It might be a 1 or 2 year contract, but usually the buyer doesn't need them. They don't really want them. They have them just for hovering support, and then they move on without them. So when the buyer in the sale process is doing due diligence and they study what makes the business tick, and they find out that the business is overly dependent on the founder, that's a risk factor. That's a problem. And so they're going to devalue the business because they're going to say, we're going to buy the business and your team is going to have to step up in areas they've never stepped up in before. Sure hope it works, but I'm going to pay you less because I'm assuming more risk because of that. So what I always try to talk to my clients about is view yourself as working towards being supplemental to the business, not essential to the business. So why don't you go work on the extraordinary sales, but set the daily, weekly, monthly mechanics to function without you? And the test is, can you go on vacation for a month, 2, 3, and the business operates smoothly? If so, then you have a business that's positioned to be able to transfer. If not, the business has a risk factor and you're going to get less. And so in order to identify, to recruit, engage, and retain key employees, we have to think about all the topics that we're talking about today, because when you lose a key employee, it's very expensive. There's a lot of goodwill that goes out the door with that person that you've trained, that you've developed, and now inadvertently or maybe consciously, you've lost that person and you have to recover from it, and it's expensive. So those are just some practical thoughts of being in this space and how important key employee retention is. So now I just wanted to talk about a few points. I feel like for the people that are near my age, they'll know the David Letterman top 10 list. Well, I'm going to start with the top 10 list of what truly motivates key employees to stay beyond salary and benefits. So I'm going to hit a few of these items. The first one is career development opportunities. So when you have a key employee, you want to show them that you're interested not just in their work output, but you're interested in their professional development. So you want to give them access to training, to mentorship, to advancement opportunities, and then they'll see you're invested in them and they're more likely to stay if you do that. Also, you want a positive, inclusive, and supportive work culture. That'll foster loyalty. and employees also are more likely to stay. You want to give the key employees recognition and appreciation. So regular acknowledgement. So for example, at my law firm, we have announcements of key transactions. And as an example, we happened to do a very large deal that closed right before the end of last year. And as tired as I was when that deal finished, I still wrote a lengthy acknowledgement of the 8 or 9 lawyers that worked on it, what they did and how I appreciated it. And then I sent it to our 870 lawyers in the firm so that everybody could see that these 8 people had stepped up and they had helped us close an important transaction, what their roles were. And these people sit back and say, I appreciate that. Somebody took the time to appreciate me. They wrote it, they circulated it to my peers, and they're proud, and they're more likely to want to dig in on the next project with you, and they're more likely to stay with the firm. Work-life balance. Employees appreciate work-life balance, flexible work arrangements. And I know we're in this world where pre-COVID, everybody went to the office. Through COVID, everybody was remote. Now we're in this quasi period where probably more people are remote than should be. But my view of this is, if it doesn't hurt the company, provide the employee with the flexibility and freedom to work the way they want to. If it hurts the company and or the individual's production, by all means, bring them back to the office. But if it doesn't, why not give them flexibility and permit them to work the way they choose to? And I know of lots of key employees that have left because the firm has decided to take a hardline stance on coming back to the office. And some people, having tasted the freedom and the flexibility, they're not willing to give that up. It's not even a monetary thing. They'll take less to keep the freedom. So if it doesn't hurt you, why not give them that? The next one is meaningful work. So we have found that employees that appreciate the purpose of their job and they believe in the company's mission, they're more likely to stay. So I always think of, you want to help these employees to be proud of the job that they do. And what would the employees say to their children about their job? What would they say to their family about what they do? So again, as a personal example, the people that work on my growth and exit planning team at Dinsmore, I reinforce that all the time. I tell them our job is to help our clients solve one of the most important challenges in their entire life. How are they going to sell their business? Because most business owners have this looming anxiety about how the end will come. They don't know what shape it will take. They don't know what price they'll get. They don't know what time it will come. So they walk around with this anxiety and they don't know how it will resolve. So we step in and we give them certainty. We give them peace of mind, and helping a buyer find the right transaction for the right price and the best terms that minimize taxes. That's really important. That changes lives. That might even change family lives and the heirs' lives to come. So this very valuable service, I try to remind my people, every single day is one of our clients' Super Bowl. It might be Tuesday to you, but we're working on a deal that's going to change our clients' lives on this Tuesday. So help get it right. Put your best effort forward. And I think having employees appreciate the important job they're doing helps them to value their job and to stay and to help to retain them.
And Jim, a note on that, the mission and vision, including the key employees and drafting that and then redrafting it as the business evolves, that's pretty impactful work as well, right? So when they start getting involved in that process, moving them from, into the essential role, many times we sit on the sideline in lead or support in leading these discussions, and, the key employees really come with, really with their A game and really help restate or reshape the vision of the organization.
That's a really good point, because, the next, it ties into the next point. The next point is strong leadership. And so employees are more likely to stay if there's strong leadership, because they know their stability, they know their job's safe, the project flow is safe, their training and expertise is safe. But the flip side of that is what Jeremy just touched on. Employees don't like to have everything just thrust upon them. They want a channel to provide input and to contribute. So a good leader will take that into account and constantly revive and revise the strategy. So strong leadership combined with meaningful work, combined with collaboration with the employees sure helps. The team, if you can get a team that works well together, that's collaborative, that's cohesive, it makes employees feel more connected and invested in their jobs. And I always think if an employee was going to leave, they're offered more money to move down the street. Some might say, all right, well, if I'm virtual and I don't have much interaction with my leaders or my team, I'm logging into a different system. Why wouldn't I just make more money? That's pretty easy. So you don't want it to be commoditized like that. You want them to know their leaders. You want them to have a personal relationship with them. You want them to know their peers and to have a good team relationship working with them. And then when they think to leave, they're going to think, I don't want to leave Brian and Pam and Sanjay. I enjoy working with them. This is going to change my life if I uproot myself. That's part of the team dynamics that come in.
Yeah, and within those relationships, one of the things to focus on is the constant calibration, right? So growth sounds romantic, but it's often disruptive, right? So having that strong dynamic and making sure that this is an inclusive, free space to ultimately have discussions within within the C-suite, within the ownership level, as well as on the key employee level, team dynamics become critical.
Yes. Job security helps. Employees want to know and feel the stability and not be anxious. Opportunities for influence. We talked a little bit about that earlier. And personal connections. All of those things packaged together will help you to keep the key employees. And if you look again at the total cost of identifying them, recruiting them, hiring them, training them, developing them, to lose them is really a massive loss. So incorporating those types of things will help you to keep them.
Yeah, it's important. Like that list of 10, Jim, it's almost common sense, right? But when we get down to the modeling and the strategy work within our teams, it's often the missing component on why strategies or contracts or past tactics don't get traction or remain, in traction, right? So, a lot of times business owners will ask us, well, how do we get started within this dialogue, right? And, most business owners have a pretty solid working relationship and cadence of communication with especially their key employees. So, I typically say, well, just ask, whether it's in the confines of the office or go out and, grab a bite to eat. Just starting and stimulating the discussion within, with the key employee group or with the key employee, really sets the stage for future, for future considerations on tactics, right? Outside counsel, whether you bring in a consultant, work with a tab facilitator, an EOS facilitator, right? I know John and we spend a lot of time in discussions around our personnel and, how can we make things better and make not only our lives, but the lives of the people that we care for, via this business enterprise progressively, better and move the, move the needle in quantifiable ways. So bringing on outside consultants is often a breath of fresh air. And then when we get to the point around on the how-to, giving options, right? Again, there's no one magic bullet. And a lot of times what these key employees are looking for is an education around the various tactics and solutions that ultimately can support, the business owner in retaining their services, right? So it's a mutual project when we're talking about this idea of retention planning and longevity planning within the personnel. Loyalty, engagement, retention, Jim, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so how do you proactively create a company culture that will foster those things? Loyalty, engagement, retention. I think you want to be proactive to ensure that you're doing all of these things. So you want to have open communication. You want to have recognition and appreciation, like I mentioned earlier. You want to have career development tracks with each employee so that they know, here's where I am, here's where I'm headed. And it's nice to know that the company's interested in my advancement and my progression. You want to consider work-life balance, an inclusive culture. You also want to give your employees empowerment and autonomy. If they feel like they don't really have a say, either in the firm or with the firm's clients or customers, they're going to feel like they're being put in a box and they don't have much impact. Everybody wants to have an impact. So if your employees, your key employees have the expertise to interface and to make decisions and to have more latitude in their daily job, it makes sense to give it to them because they'll be more proud of the impact that they can offer. Team building, that helps to get people to know each other and to connect. That can be social events, regular social events, team retreats, collaborative projects. It matters. I know at our firm, we set up a basketball league for a lot of people that never played basketball or haven't played in years. And we've started playing other professional firms. So we set up an architectural firm, an engineering firm, an accounting firm, an insurance firm. And the firm played, people got to know each other that they would have never known. Families came to the games and got to know the other families because they were there in support. And then afterwards, we had a little refreshment hour where the other team and the team that showed would interface and bond. So you were building connections with the other firm and within the firm. And I found there were a lot of working connections that developed out of that activity, and people really appreciated it. Healthy work environment, alignment with values, social responsibility. A lot of our younger generation employees, they really care to understand what are we doing that is benefiting social responsibility initiatives. And a lot of them will come forward and suggest a community service or sustainability effort initiative. And we listen to them and we'll empower it and we'll go to the budget and use our dollars to support those. And they see that we care about things other than just doing the work and collecting the money. So I think doing those types of things can create the right type of company culture.
Perfect. Jim, before we get to more of the technical pieces, right? Because I know we're going to lead a couple of case studies. Thoughts on mistakes, right? Common mistakes that we see that can derail or throw a plan off kilter, so to speak.
Yeah, a lot of the mistakes are the inverse of what we just said. You build the culture, not doing those things are the mistakes, but I'll point out a few. If you have limited growth opportunities, you have an employee doing a job and you don't really see the next job for them, they probably don't see it either. If you ignore it and you don't attend to it, resentment may build, and before you know it, they leave. And you didn't want that to happen, but you didn't head it off at the pass when you should have known.
Yeah, but lack of alignment with the intention is critical. John likes a story that I tell about my key of all key employees. Her name is Chastity, and essentially, she's not motivated by money. She likes paid time off, flexibility, understands that she can go pick up her daughter. And I was racking my brain when I was doing some internal planning here at the firm around designing 401k and some retention bonuses and all that. And then, she and I just by chance went out and had a cup of coffee one day. And she goes, Jeremy, this is all great and it's truly appreciated. But really what my goal is here is to, because, we're similar in age, is to retire with you. And then the day that my daughter, Olivia, goes to college, I just want a resource where I know myself and my husband can ultimately now pay for college, right? So, we will talk about the more, non-qualified deferred compensation and phantom stock and all those things that, get a lot more sizzle in the industry. But that was just one qualitative discussion that I had with my keyest of key employees. And 100% what that taught me was just aligning the plan, aligning the strategy with, at the core, what's important to the individual. Cost us nothing, put together something really simple, informally funded it, and I'm confident she's going to be with us to the end of time, which is pretty awesome. So before we get to a little bit more technical, Jim, let's talk a little bit about, retention strategies and how they should be tailored, right? Understanding the persona is super important, right? So, number one, understanding roles and needs, right? On making sure that the great thing about developing strategies, especially if we're talking about non-qualified strategies, they could be bespoke, right? Understanding, are we solving for a technical role? Or understanding, are we solving for a creative? Understanding if we're solving for a sales or a customer facing role. These are all core things. The next is considering the personality types, right? Are we dealing with an introvert, an extrovert, analytical thinkers, creative thinkers, right? Just getting really just grounded on, again, the persona that we're looking to solve for is super critical and important. Aligning career goals, right? Short-term, long-term, entrepreneurial aspirations. It's almost like for those wealth managers in the room, putting together a comprehensive plan, right? So we want to make sure that the programs that we're rolling out to support our key employees, and quite frankly, all of our employees, are in alignment with their short-term and long-term aspirations. Flexibility, working arrangements, right? Again, to my point around chastity, a lot of people value other things other than compensation. So is remote work appropriate? Working hours, flexibility to pick up children, all of that has certain qualitative factors when we start, rolling out some of the programs that we roll out over time. Last is professional development opportunities, right? Key employees, though they may not be the business owner, they're typically very ambitious, right? So how can we be in support of ultimately accelerating their learning paths, job rotation, shadowing, all a part of the professional development process.
Yeah, and I think there's no replacement for intensive study about the particular humans that work at the company and what their individual needs are, and asking them and talking to them and finding out what's important to them and understanding the differences among your employee team and what different buttons need to be pushed to cause them to be happy. Because I would almost guarantee that with the loss of any key employee, if you went back in time, if the employee was identified, recruited, and engaged, at some point they were onboarded, and then things may have spiraled after, and you could trace it to a point. When was that employee ignored? When were there not clear discussions about their needs that could have been attended to? And that might have festered, built to resentment. And then at some point, it's a point of no return. So I've had clients try to save the key employee by saying, now I'll give you equity. I'll give you more flexibility. I'll give you what you want. And the employee said, it's a little too late. Like I've endured under this regime for a long time. You weren't asking me about this a year ago or 2 years ago. And now that I have a great offer, you want me to change my plans and give up on that great offer? I'm moving because I can't be assured you'll keep with it because you didn't do it in the past. So if it matters, it matters. And like Jeremy cares very much about his key employee, he's making sure that he locks her down. Our clients need to do the same things.
Perfect. And then last, tailoring benefits, right? Diversified benefits for everyone, and then also personalized incentives. And the personalized incentives can be department driven or individually driven, right? But just really working with our key employees on going through all the nuances of how how they stand to gain, and how can they thrive within our culture and our little ecosystem at Tomorrow or any of our companies that we serve, right? So tailoring benefits and personalizing the incentives, I think, are critical as well, Jim.
Yes.
Talk to me. So this is one of Jim's, I love this conversation that you lead, Jim, because this is, like the prequel to the technical stuff that I get all giddy about, right? So, we call it continuum of compensation, but essentially what it is, it's a sandwich board, right? And it's the roadmap of evolution on how, as business owners, we ultimately are assessing the various programs that we're going to roll out over a period of time to, again, put together a well thought out retention strategy.
Yes. So we've talked a lot about the issue, the problem, ways to identify it, the things that need to be done. there's a whole other evolution of this discussion that goes into the how. How do you resolve it? What are the tools that you can use that are tried and true that can help to address these issues? And one of the considerations to think of is, how do you pay your people, and how can that be structured in a way to solve your problems? So when I look at this continuum of compensation, that how you pay your people, it starts out at the most basic. You hire an employee, they might be hourly compensated. They have to report their hours, they get paid for their hours. It's as simple as that. That person can leave and get a new job with an hourly rate, and they're off to the races with the new employer. No deep entanglement. So then that moves up the continuum to fixed monthly compensation. Now you're committing, the person's hired, they might be an at-will employee, but you're not so granular as to track their hours. They show up for work, they get paid per month, and they are accountable more on a monthly basis. If you're generally dissatisfied with them, you can terminate them, and that's the next level, is fixed monthly. So then some hourly and or fixed monthly, you may end up paying your employees an annual subjective discretionary bonus. So a lot of business owners do this because they haven't done the work to think out a better alternative. So they pay their people what they pay them, and then they get to the end of the year and they say, now I got to figure out what I'm going to pay people in bonuses. So they look at their profitability, they look at the money that they have, they think about the humans involved, they think about what they paid them last year. And this is a miserable time for business owners that do this, because they feel like they're the new Santa Claus at the end of the year. They have pressure to make everybody's holiday. They have pressure to exceed the prior year, but they don't have objective standards. So it's all in general, how do I just feel about Jeremy? What do I want to give him? And then they end up agonizing over it, which ruins their December. They pay out what they pay out, it eats into their profit, and then they go about starting the whole process again in January for a new year. So annual subjective discretionary bonuses are really tough, and that only provides limited golden handcuffs. So if you're somebody working at the company and you're due to get a subjective discretionary bonus and you have a good offer in November, maybe you'll hang in there for the end of the year, because historically you get a really good bonus. So you might want to hang in there and get it and then leave in January. So maybe that keeps you intact for a little while longer, but you don't know what it is. You can't really count on it. It's not as good. The next level of that is an annual defined objective bonus. So now you start out in January and you say, let's have an employee performance review. Let's lay out what are your targets to achieve performance-wise. And some of them can be company performance goals. Some of them can be employee performance goals. And if you hit these targets, and if we hit these targets, I'm going to pay you so much at the end of the year. For one thing, that's now liberated the business owner from this excruciating exercise in December. And for another thing, now you've done something that might actually change the behavior of the employee. If you do this right, the employee is going to manage themselves. They're going to wake up and they're going to look at what is the criteria for me to hit so that I can hit my financial goals. They're going to manage it. They're going to change their behavior. They're going to maximize it. And then at the end of the year, Santa Claus goes away. Now you bring out the calculator. You're just calculating what's due because it was objectively set and established. So that's the next level. And so that gives you golden handcuffs a bit more, because the employee knows something good's coming. It's quantifiable. It's coming for sure. And it's coming at the end of the year. The next level is deferred compensation. So you may say, I've got a bonus for you, and we're going to calculate it at the end of the year, and it's going to be objective, but you're not going to get it all at the end of the year. So I may calculate that and say, all right, Jeremy, you're due to get $60,000 at the end of the year. I'm going to give you 20 now. I'm going to have you vest in the remaining third to be paid the next year, vest in the remaining third to be paid the next year. With that vesting, rolling vesting, that would stack. So then a year from now, you'll get another bonus that will vest again in 3 years. So in any given time period, if you leave, you stand to lose the unpaid, unvested, deferred compensation. So now you've got real golden handcuffs. If somebody's approached by a competitive offer, somebody's going to have to buy them out of their accrued deferred compensation that has yet to vest, because otherwise they're going to lose all that. The next level, only a few more, stock appreciation rights. So now you say to an employee, you've been a good employee, I'm going to cut you in. So I'm going to treat you as if you were an owner of the company for annual distributions and for a distribution when I sell. But it's going to be based on an increase in the value from the date of the grant to when we would exit, or what the distribution would be based on historical and above. So now for those people, they're told, you get cut in, you're not cut in back to the base value, you're cut in on the growth. Help us to grow, and you'll get a piece of it annually, and you'll get a piece of it at exit. So that provides golden handcuffs. Phantom equity is similar, except it goes back to the base value. So now you say to an employee, you're highly valued, I'm going to include you back to $0. So our company's worth 10 million now, but you get cut in as if we were just founding it. So you're going to get a percentage of annual distributions and a distribution when the exit comes based on the purchase price, as if you were an owner of it all. And I've had some clients that give phantom to long-standing employees when they start the program, and they give stock appreciation rights to employees that have joined more recent because they haven't contributed in the actual growth. So like I said, just a couple more. Then there's actual equity. So you could actually grant your employee real equity. Now, I always tell clients, let's be very careful and think that through, because once an employee has real equity, they can create a lot of problems. State corporation statutes say that you have to give them information. They can demand information as a reason of being a shareholder. So you have to give them financial statements and corporate documents, and they can pick through those, and they can ask questions, and they can create problems if they don't like the expenses or the quasi-personal expenses. They can challenge things. And if there's ever a real conflict, there can be minority shareholder lawsuits that pop up because they actually have ownership. The other programs that I mentioned, they're all synthetic equity. You treat them as if they have equity, but they really don't. And when they receive the money, it's ordinary income. It's not capital gains. That's the downside. Real equity entitles the holder to get capital gains, but you want to be real careful to make sure that you're not getting involved in a situation that is going to create more trouble than benefit. And the last one I'll say is when you are moving towards a sale process, a lot of times we put into place stay bonus agreements for key employees. So you might say to a key employee that I need your help. I want you to help me get this deal closed. I'm going to tell you what's going on. I'm going to want you to help me. And beyond that, after the closing, the buyer wants you, and I'll get more for the business if I can lock you down. So if you'll agree to this, I'm going to give you some significant amount, and it might be 2 times their salary. It has to be meaningful or it doesn't work. I've had it as much as 10 times their salary for really key people. But then you say at the closing, you're going to get a third. On the 1-year anniversary, you're going to get a third. And on the 2-year anniversary, you're going to get a third. Then you can say to the buyer, I've done part of your work for you. I've locked down the key employees for you. And so you don't have to worry about them. And they'll still get a new employment agreement in place with them. And I've even had it negotiated where buyers will pay part of that stay bonus. But that way you can work them in as part of the team. They help you get the deal closed, and they help to create stability after the closing. So that is the continuum.
Perfect. And Dave, if you could share with the group those 2 PDF white papers. Essentially what those white papers are a much deeper dive into all those subcategories or tactics, right? You can just upload those on our perfect. Thank you. Jim, perhaps we do a case study. I'll jump into a basic case study, but I think a fact pattern that I see very very often, right? Because the reality is, everyone gets excited around the possibility of selling to private equity, a bank, or a very large strategic partner. But 70% of at least the fact patterns that we see are a lot smaller and condensed, but very impactful, right? So essentially, um, the case study I'm going to lead is one of a business owner who runs a landscape architecting firm here in the Northeast. Gentleman with 59 years old, and his business value was about 1.5. And in working with some of our folks, we think we could drive EBITDA within that business and increase that valuation. Another key important fact here was business owner also had a client that started, or excuse me, a child that started in the business and ended up leaving to pursue another career path, right? So that was an impactful moment for my business owner client, where essentially he thought that that business and a part of his legacy planning was going to be the transfer of the business to perpetuate the legacy going forward to his son. And that just didn't come to fruition. Um, Again, small business that we were looking at, 10 to 12 employees, two of which were ultimately key. And also one talent that we potentially think could be key in the future. So, there's a suspect there that we also wanted to put a plan in place to accommodate for if that individual rose from the ranks of rank and file to also being a key employee. Our engagement started pretty basic, right? We worked both on his personal side of the balance sheet as well as the business side. And I was actually introduced in to work with one of the colleague CFPs on my team to essentially just button up certain aspects of his retirement estate planning. And really what, the aha moment that I had there as a practitioner was essentially the retirement planning and the estate planning had everything to do with the key employee planning, right? So essentially, in doing that estate planning, that's what fostered or stimulated the discussion around, hey, I thought my estate planning was going to be just giving my kids the business, and that didn't come to fruition. And we also found that the high concentration of his net worth within the business is leading us down a path now that we need to start diversifying that individual's net worth, at least for the next 8 to 10 years. I say 8 to 10 years because essentially that was the time frame that the said business owner ultimately gave us as it relates to wanting to start progressing into retirement. He loves his work, etc. Right? So in doing that assessment, we essentially created a parallel path on 3 topics, right? There was a focus on risk management. We did some baseline work, calibrated the P&C, some of the other benefits at work, did some key employee insurance. We revamped the qualified plan to align with his 8 to 10 year window. There were some benefits of making adjustments and adding profit sharing and defined benefits, all day to day in my wealth management world. But then in adding also a consultant to help us with this project, we found that based on his industry, his licensing, and his want to perpetuate the legacy, an option to sell to a third party, an option to sell to private equity was very, very unlikely. So be it that he had a strong relationship with his key employees and actually in the past had a contract driven up to really stimulate a discussion around transferring the business that didn't go well. We essentially led a town hall meeting with Jim and his colleague Jason, and also those key employees around what it is that we were looking to do, which is essentially create an 8-year roadmap to ultimately support our client in exiting, and more importantly, for the key employees, giving them the confidence and the financial wherewithal to ultimately step into the role of a business owner after that said 8-year period. And we all know that 8 may turn to 7, 7 may turn to 12, right? So one of the keys here is the flexibility. Prior to doing the financial modeling, which is where I technically lead those discussions, what we did do was a 1-hour Q&A with each of the key employees. We tested the temperature of each individual on a sidebar, so to speak, to make sure that, hey, being a business owner is something that they actually wanted to do. We led a discussion around opportunities and issues to navigate within the day-to-day operation. And we also understood that you want to get an understanding of the individual's financial situation, because one of the key attributes of many key employees, at least living in the expensive part of the world that I live in, is they're getting compensated fair, if not above rates, but their balance sheet isn't essentially, in most cases, positioned to support writing a 6, 7, or even an 8-figure check when the time comes, right? So we wanted to get into the roots of the financial makeup for the individual as well. Interesting enough, we had both spouses on those calls to really support as well, because it is a household decision when a key employee is looking to make a jump from key employee status to ultimately a business owner, right? So once we had all that qualitative work done, that's where Jim, Jason, and I ultimately jumped into a discussion around modeling, right? And I won't bore you with that, but essentially how we model is as follows, right? It's part legal drafting and then part metric driven and cash flow mapping, right? So essentially what what that modeling looks like is, one, we lay out a transition overview, half a page bullet point summary on ultimately what the core objectives are, as well as the key next steps, transition assumptions for both the company and also the buyer, right? And that's with the support of the CPA as well as the CVA that was supplying all parties data. We did a quick red line as well as a legal draft summary of the transaction. And then ultimately, as the discussion evolved, we confirmed within all the options that we laid out that the owner, in fact, did want to award shares in ultimately day one for past merit and to support this project going forward, right? So he was really motivated to ultimately get this business over a period of time to his key employees. The last piece is laying out the performance requirements, right? So of course you get your upfront bonus as it relates to shares, but now the key here is ultimately to lay out performance metrics that will ultimately result in, over a 9-year period, specifically the transition of 24.5% ownership or 49% ownership to the key employees, provided that they are in support or stimulating added value to increase the valuation of the business. Now, the last piece here that I thought to be the most important discussion was, after we kind of spoke this plan into existence, we then went back with the key employees in a group setting, and we showed them how to model what ultimately will be the final payment to my business owner, which is the 51% payment, right? They really needed to get a good understanding of what facilities were out there to ultimately support what is going to be their last 7-figure check to my client, and give them the confidence that they had the financial wherewithal to do that, right? So, really just a Q&A around letting them know, what the banking facilities out there, whether it be SBA or non-SBA, seller's notes, et cetera, right? So essentially right now we're in year 4 of this transition. And really now we're refocusing back on the qualitative work. My business owner actually ends up works one-on-one with a TAB facilitator, and also elected to bring in EOS as a part of his business to deal with some of the day-to-day nuances of really just building up culture in preparation for the exit. So I thought that was a real practical fact pattern for, we're not talking about Procter & Gamble here. We're talking about a really nice, what was once a lifestyle business, that we're going to give our business owner a last bite of the apple, so to speak, as it relates to transitioning both money as well as the legacy that he's built up over the last, I think, 40 years of working in the landscaping space.
Yeah, and I think we really love to work with Jeremy and his team on projects like that, because they have this deep technical expertise, and then they are creative and they listen to the clients and they figure out what they want and need. But the clients might understand conceptually what the issue and the problem and what they need to do, but they have no idea how to model it. And you just have to start working up a model subject to comment, revise. And before you know it, you have something that will work, but they don't even know how to get started. And it's so much easier for us because Jeremy and his team will engineer that stuff, and then we can do the legal component and take the baton and do our part. but it's a good teaming exercise to help clients get what they need.
Perfect.
So a case study that I have that was very interesting was I had a tech firm that had 12 salespersons and they wanted to sell. So we went through our normal process, which is we send them, they engage us, we send them a detailed due diligence checklist as if we were the buyer. We collect all the info, we go through it, we create a virtual data room that we scrub and make clean. We dig into their objectives. And we found out that the ownership group wanted to sell. They wanted to sell as soon as they could. They said it could be within 5 years, but sooner the better. So we looked at what number they wanted to hit, and we found out that they were short, that they needed to grow their EBITDA by about 30% to get the deal done that they wanted to get done. And they had buyers identified, strategic buyers, even a couple financial buyers. So we thought we could get the right deal. It's just the valuation would not support the number that they wanted. So after a lot of thought, we came up with an idea to create a new compensation program for the 12 salespeople. And what we said was, first of all, we're going to tell them this is extraordinary. This is for a short, limited time from now until sale. After the sale occurs, you're going to revert back to a normal program. So let's make sure we understand that. But then we said each person would have their base compensation cut slightly based upon the prior year's production. So if you just do what you did last year, you're going to make a little less money. But if you grow your sales, we're going to give you an incredible new incentive. You'd get 50% of the profit generated from your sales. And the average before, the norm was about 22% of what was flowing through to salespeople. So it was communicated they could get 50%. Go kill it while you can for the time before the sale, because you can make a heck of a lot of money. And these people did. Sales skyrocketed. Some of the salespeople made over $1 million a year. The C-suite people at the company were making $300,000 to $500,000. So they were saying to me, "Is this right? I mean, we've never paid sales people these kinds of amounts." And I said, "Trust me, you're going to get the outcome that you want. It's okay. Take the short-term hit for the long-term benefit." So the EBITDA grew by like crazy, and they ended up selling. They grew the EBITDA by 43 calendar years after the plan began. The seller increased the EBITDA by 45%. And then they ended up selling at an 8 multiple that exceeded their goal. And the salespeople understood. They went back to a program that was similar to what was in place before. And the company, that was a few years ago, the company's doing very, very well and has grown since. But it was a way to spike production by overpaying for EBITDA. And the EBITDA, this is all recurring revenue. So anybody that was captured, that's why we got the multiple that we got, because they could bank on that in future revenue. So that ended up being a creative way to solve the client's objectives with a new compensation program.
Great. Look at us, Dave, on time. Wow.
Just all set then at this point?
Yeah. Last 2-3 minutes, any questions or are we good?
John?
Hey, Jerry and Jim, thank you. And I know both of these guys, so I'm fortunate to work with Jeremy every month, and Jim is presented at my board, so very familiar with him as well. Question: many of my members are still in the subjective discretionary annual bonus, and I'm trying to get them all to pay for performance, but I hear often, well, what happens if we're having a bad year? So, and they know in June, they're not going to get anything at the end of the year. So how do you guys what do you do about that?
I think it's many factors that go into the objective bonus, and some of it can be based on effort. Some of it can be based on results. Some can be based on individual results. Some can be based on company results. The truth is, if the company has a really bad year, the employees should share in that, because they they probably contributed to the bad year. And there's some fact patterns we could go through that isn't the case, but they probably should absorb some of that. But if you have work effort markers as well, so for example, like at our firm, for our associates, they are rewarded based on hours, based on collections on those hours. And then as somebody moves up the chain, lawyers get rewarded based on origination and business development, but that's not clouded in the early years. It's more about effort and quality of work. So it's perceived if the client doesn't pay, I guess the partner brought in a bad client. It's not your fault if you did good work and you billed and you worked. So that shouldn't be held against you. So I think it's splitting it between effort and actual production.
And John, it's actually an argument for defined objective bonuses, right? So if you get to the point of defined objective bonuses and there's a lack of profitability in the organization, it's not going to lead to this ambiguous discussion around why we didn't give bonuses, right? If it's metric driven, if it's defined and you happen to have a down year, which happens in business, now suddenly it doesn't lead to a funny discussion around why we're not having bonuses. Rather, we could quantify why the bonuses aren't as heavy as they were in previous years, and also put us on a path now to right the ship, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and what I've been telling my members is, and I think you mentioned this earlier, you guys mentioned this earlier, was, half the bonus is company-wide, half the bonus is personal-wide. So company can maybe have a down year and you're going to get dinged on that. But if personally you met certain metrics, at least you're getting something.
Yep.
So and you're trying to retain, you want to retain it. Sometimes there are good employees. Company has a bad year, but there are great employees. You don't want them to leave. So you don't want all the bonus to be geared towards just the company, and then they get nothing. That's my concern.
You can also, in more complicated compensation schemes, you can have it averaged out over a number of years. So like if you have salesperson or business development anchored compensation, you could say if you have a great year this year, you don't get it all. You get some, but then if you have a bad year next year, you're going to benefit from the year before. So you average it out over maybe a 3 or 4 year period. So no one gets dinged in a big way for a bad year, but they also don't get all the benefit in a great year.
That's a great idea.
All right, we're right up against it. We'll wrap with that. Excellent call. Jeremy, Jim, just really appreciate this. A lot of great information, ideas, case studies, that kind of thing. So thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.